Hi, I'm Devin, your host for Humanity Rising's Race to Speak Up podcast and founder of hashtag Race to Speak Up, an anti-bullying organization. The Race to Speak Up podcast is a place where we have open and engaging conversations about bullying prevention, how to be upstanders, and how we are making a positive change in our communities. So the question now is, how do you race to speak up? Hello and welcome to the Race to Speak Up podcast. I'm your host, Devin Moore. Today's guest is Joanne M. Cherisma. Joanne is a mother and a nurse by profession. In 2016, she started Beyond the Abuse in order to bring awareness on abusive relationships and provide hope, empowerment, and support, as well as confidence to the victims. Since then, she has been using her voice and her writing as an outlet for those who can understand the slings and arrows of life at many speaking engagements, DV events, and workshops in the United States, Canada, and Haiti. She has a realistic view of situations which allow her readers to go on journeys through her writing. Joanne writes poetic prose that speaks to the hearts of many. Her passion for writing embodies her empathetic nature while showcasing her inner human vulnerability that sometimes go unheard. Welcome, Joanne. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, well, it's good for you to be here. Now, why don't you tell us about Beyond the Abuse?
Well, like you mentioned earlier, Beyond the Abuse was created back in 2016, and it was basically founded after my personal experience with domestic violence. I was in an abusive marriage for about 5 years. And once I got out, I wanted to do something more. I wanted to help other people, prevent them from being in the same situation as myself was. So that's where Beyond the Abuse came from. It was at Beyond the Abuse, we not only focusing on the victim, but we also help them with their family members to become whole. We raise awareness about domestic violence, and we help people recognize the signs and avoid falling into situations, and provide them some tools that will help them in case they might already be in the situation, that might help them cope and eventually get out. We help the victim acquire like self-confidence, and throughout that process, gaining their self-esteem back. And also we provide them with resources that will help them gain their independence financially as well. And in all of the work that we do, we try to include the whole family.
Honestly, it's really important that we need that. I feel like more people need to acknowledge the fact that there are abusive relationships. And, not only does it affect the life of, the victim, but it affects others' lives too, those who love the victim. And so I'm just like, we need to have this. So, thank you for starting this. And then I know you further your work through your writings. Would you like to tell us more about those?
Sure. I also published a book, I think it was back in 2018. It's called I Never Thought I Would Be a Statistic. In the book, I share my story, my personal story with abuse. And at the time I wrote the book, it was mostly a therapeutic way for me. And it eventually, by sharing and getting all the feedback, and I was able to help other people, because at the time I'm still kind of are, but I was very shy, and public speaking wasn't one of my strong points. So writing was the best way that I was able to share my story. And I was hoping then that by somebody listening to it, reading to it, that person would have realized that they're not the only one going through the situation. And the most important thing, I was hoping that it will help them realize that there's always hope, that even if they will be in a situation like this, not only they're not alone, but they don't have to stay. It doesn't have to always be like that. There's always hope at the end of the tunnel.
It's very important. It's very important that we let others know that, you're not alone and that we can help you within your situations or whatever you're going through. So with your writing, was writing therapeutic for you?
It was very, very therapeutic because like I mentioned earlier, sometimes like when we go through certain situations, we kind of like find ourselves holding everything inside and not talking and not sharing with anybody. So putting down everything on paper, at first it was very hard, I have to be honest, because it felt like I was reliving everything that happened. But it also helped me kind of take myself outside of myself and kind of see myself. So it was hard because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't really, like, I realized that I really let this happen. And all of this happened. How did I got there? But at the same time, being able to express myself helped me free myself of all these different kind of emotion and feeling, all the feelings of shame, of me dealing with my self-esteem and all the guilt, because I also felt a lot of guilt because I mostly was dealing with the fact that I was the one that decided to marry that person. I choose that person, so I had to deal with this and get to the point where I had to realize that I wasn't responsible for it, even if I married the person, but I wasn't responsible for their decision. So I didn't make them do whatever they did. So it was very helpful, kind of like, you know, figured out all the different dynamic that was going on and reach the point of peace and finding strength not only to write it but also sharing it, because it it was like I was putting myself out there and I was letting other people inside of my life, which I never done before to that extent. And I also have couple of poetry in there because I like poetry. I always love poetry as far as I can remember. And I'm currently also working on a poetry book. So yeah, it was very helpful to me. And I'll encourage anybody, kind of going through anything, to put it down on paper, because sometimes it really helps. It gives you like a lot of different perspective and self-realization.
Well, first, I want to say I really am sorry to hear what you went through. And I really want to dive into the mental health aspect because I know you touched upon a few different challenges that arose within, the results of going through an abusive relationship. So, do you think it's common for a lot of people who do go through abusive or just like I'll just say like negative relationships to feel that guilt or feel, like maybe even depressed, or like what do you think it's common, and what do you think are like the main mental health like detriments that arise from those type of relationships?
First, I'll speak for myself. I know, um, personally, I deal with it, and also for many other people that I had to work with. And there's always that feeling of shame that come with it most of the time. And mostly, personally, I know it's because that nobody, everybody is looking for that perfect relationship. Nobody wants to be in a relationship where they don't feel comfortable or they being abused. And they have to go through all of this, but and they're going through it with somebody that they love, somebody that they wanted to be with. So I know for myself, the shame came in place mostly because of the goals that I had for myself, like the way I perceive a relationship and the goal that I had for my personal relationship. So being the person, like I mentioned earlier, that kind of like decided to be with that person, and I blame myself for not having a better judgment. I blame myself for not listening to some advice they had given me in the beginning. And I blame myself for all the choices that I made. And I felt, for some reason, I really felt responsible, even if I wasn't responsible. But it took me some time to get to the point where I had to accept the fact that I wasn't responsible, and having to deal with all these different thought in your head and not being able to share with anybody. Basically, it's kind of like made me become very seclusive. I would not talk to nobody, and I will smile. Everybody will think like, oh my gosh, they look like the perfect couple, or maybe she's not talking because now she's married and she has to deal with her married life. But that wasn't the case. And being so exclusive also made me depressed, and I didn't understand that I was also depressed because I didn't come from a culture where they spoke about depression. So like not wanting to get out of bed or not wanting to do things, I did not identify all of these feelings as being depressed until I got out the relationship and started going to therapy. So to kind of like explain, there's obviously, of course, there's many different mental issue that affect the dynamic, but somebody might not even realize that they dealing with mental issue because they so focused on surviving that that relationship, staying alive, and they have children alive. They're so focusing on making sure that their children are okay that they're not even realizing like the broader picture. Like they being depressed, they have triggers, and even after getting out, you still have to deal with the repercussion that come from being in it, right? The anxiety. You always have that feeling that somebody is looking over your, I don't know, depending on how bad it was, because there's different kind of abuse. There's financial, emotional, physical abuse, which is the most obvious, but there's all these different kind of abuse that nobody really see, but they still going on. So so it takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and the work really starts once you're out, because you have to kind of work on all of these different components and work on making yourself whole again, because it's something that once it happened to you, it's like you're marked for the rest of your life. It's never really goes away.
You see, just like me being on like an outsider, not really knowing about this and hearing your story is just so like terrifying to imagine. But I'm so happy that you've been able to help others through it, through like Beyond the Abuse and through your book and through your writings. I'm so happy that you're really able to help others through that and turn that negative into a positive. How have other people's stories that you've encountered or heard about, how have they impacted you?
Well, it's something that I always say, every time I talk to somebody. You always think that your story is the worst until you heard somebody else's story and be like, oh my gosh, wow. So in our session and with the meeting, other people, I had the chance of listening to other stories, and it's very it's I'll say it's very unfortunate and sad. But for a while I thought one of the reasons why I never wanted to share my story in the beginning, it's because I felt I was the only person that was going through it. And then, once I started talking and sharing, I realized that, oh my gosh, like there's many other people that, and it's so broad and it's so all over the place. Domestic violence is something that doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter your race, your background, your financial status, your family. It really doesn't matter. And I heard so many different stories, that made me think that, wow, like my story wasn't like, I had to put myself outside of myself and kind of like this is really happening. And every time like you think that's the worst story you can hear, you heard somebody else's story, and you kind of like, oh my gosh, like this is really common, like women, a lot of men and women go through this, and other people unfortunately didn't even survive. And it's a lot of different kind of you know I want to say stories, but what I can say, there's healing through sharing, because every time somebody shared, it make other people realize not only, they're not alone, they did not do this, but also kind of like feel like you belong to something. Somehow it make you feel like there's nothing wrong with you, and you didn't make this happen to you, and bad thing happen to good people all the time, that you're not necessarily responsible for it.
I really think it is true that there's like healing through sharing. Because I know that whenever I'm sharing my personal bullying story, and, whenever I'm really diving deep into how there is these three boys who put my face onto a bunch of different racist images, and like kind of just diving into those emotions that arose from that, not that I'm trying to relate abusive relationships to like that type of bullying. I'm just saying, like being able to talk about the emotions and the trauma that arose from that, and being able to, just relate to someone. It goes so far. And having that open conversation, it goes so far. Being able to understand and just listen. Like, I'm here just listening to you. I mean, this is an open conversation, but I'm just listening to you. And I'm really just am like trying to understand. And, like, I'm really so sorry to hear that there's like all these different things that you go through. And then, you're still saying there's an aspect that you're like, you blame yourself. And like, there's so many different things. The main thing that I see when it comes to abusive relationships is just other people blaming, like, say it's the man abusing the woman in the relationship, a lot of other outsiders of blaming the woman. And it could be, that person or that victim already blaming themselves. So it's just added on to that pain, and adding on and adding on and adding on. That's the main thing that I've seen with abusive relationships. So whenever I think about it, I'm just like, you really don't know what's going on in a person's life, and you shouldn't feel so confident and so powerful to
Exactly.
judge. We all have our own, natural perspectives on
Yeah.
things, but to purposely go out of your way and like verbally say it or put it online, how you feel about, say, like Joanne's relationship, or someone else's relationship, that is not your place. That is not what you should be doing. And so that's why I'm like, I really like being here and speaking to you. It really is opening my eyes to the amount of pain that you went through.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, people often say, oh, it must have not been so bad, otherwise she would have leave. What did she say if it was so bad? It's simply because people don't understand everything that even come into living. Because it's one thing, it's first, it's easier to stay with what you already know, because a lot of time these women, especially if they depend financially on the person, and I don't want to say women, because it also happened to men as well.
Yeah.
You leaving that person, you need a plan. You can just get up and leave, because when you leave, where are you gonna go? And if you have children, where are you gonna leave? And if you weren't working for the whole time, now you're going into that unknown space. You don't know what's gonna happen. It's very scary. So a lot of people, they stay for that reason, because they're scared, and they've been going through the situation for so long. They've learned to live with it. Like some people will tell you, I try to make the best out of it. I try not to upset the person. I remain quiet. I kind to adjust, and you learn to adjust with it. And also, a lot of people, they get killed on their way out, because when the other person realize that they don't have as much power on you that they used to, um, they're not gonna let it go like that. And then there's always like an outburst. That's why even with working with survivors or victim, they always tell them, you need an exit plan. You need to know when after this where you're gonna go. Do you know anybody safe that the person is not gonna go where you're gonna go next? Because when they get so upset, some people can get so angry at the moment, you don't know what might happen. So it's a process in itself, the process of leaving. It's not like you're just gonna get up one day and just like, oh, I'm leaving, I'm out of here. You have to make sure that you remain safe the whole time, that you if you have children, that the children are safe. And then it's a lot. And then and we know all the court work in this state. You have to go to court. You have to go now fight for custody, visitation if you have children. You have to, sometimes the people, they don't even believe your story. You have to go even fight to make your story believable. And it's a lot of different aspect that most people, when they watch on the outside, they don't even think about all of that. They just, like you said, make some judgment, and they see on the outside, but they never know what's the bigger and broader picture is. And it's so easy to make the victim feel worse than they're already feeling.
Yeah.
And not giving, because some people sometimes, like, they know something is going on, but nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody never called the other person, telling them what they're doing is wrong. So you, as a victim, obviously, like, if they're not saying that the other person is doing something wrong, so you have to be, like, in your head, you're thinking like you're the one doing something that you're not supposed to do. So all of this different aspect come into place, and it's very hard. And you already have to be dealing with the fact, that you already going through this, and that it's not a comfortable situation. But it's just so much that come into this.
I mean, we need to combat all that negative energy with positive energy. Because I always tell, like, whenever there's, say, like a peer, or whenever I'm speaking on a webinar or some event that I'm speaking to youth or even adults too, I'm always like, you really don't know what's happening behind closed doors. You don't know what's happening in that person's life. So don't be too quick to judge. Don't be, or at least just don't be too quick to say something that could potentially lead to that person feeling even worse than they already do. They're already going through such and such and such. Why would you want to add on to that pain?
Yeah.
Imagine if you were in their shoes. People need to think about that. Put yourself in their shoes. Right now, I'm like trying to, really listen to you and understand all the pain that you've gone through. I've gone through my own pain, but it's still different forms because you've gone through your pain because of, relationships. Although, in a way, if you really think about it, like, a lot of different things are also relationships now that I'm kind of thinking about it, because it's happening between people, which I do see that. But when you're in an abusive relationship, that's a whole nother story, That's what I'm like seeing from you. It's a whole nother story. There's also that outsider aspect who maybe, saying all these different rude and like really out there type of things to you, That's so mind-boggling, because I look at it from the fact of, why would you want to hurt Joanne? She's already going through something. Why would you want to do that? You should sit there and at least just listen to her if you've never gone through that, and help her, And now you're helping others. And then I know that you mentioned before, like going through all these different like trauma and like different results that came from that abusive relationship. You said that within your culture, that wasn't really talked about. I know you're from Haiti, right?
Yeah.
So, like, how is it different? Like, what is that culture? And like, how come that's not really ever talked about?
Well, it's not only in the Haitian culture. I feel like it's mostly in the Black community itself. They the way that they deal with mental health is, it's just like, like growing up parents, they work so hard for you to to give you whatever they're giving you. It's like, how you even have time to be depressed, or what would you be depressed for? You should be happy. Like, there's just like some subject that, I don't know, they just don't talk about them for some reason. It's not like they don't know that they exist, but it's just nobody really sit down and kind of like analyze it and go deep into it. Like growing up, like we knew that abuse exists, right? People will be on their wife or whatever, but they always tells you, if he did it once, you're gonna keep doing it. Like, you just leave after the first time. But nobody kind of like explain to you the process, like the sign of this happening, because there's signs that you might see in the beginning that will show you that somebody is inclined to abuse, right? They don't talk about the sign, or how do you prevent yourself to get in a situation like this, how even if like speak up for yourself. If somebody did something, it's okay to talk about your feelings and emotion. Nobody wants to talk about their feelings and emotion, like especially like we see like our boys. And I only say that because I have a son. It's they mostly tend to tell like the kids, like, gotta be strong, suck it up, don't cry. You boys don't cry, or girls, you're supposed to be certain ways, you do this, you do that. And then you have that proud, like, I know for us Haitian, we're very proud. So you got that feeling of proud, keeping everything inside, like you have everything under control, like, or you smile, and then you wake up, you do what you're supposed to do, and then you go move along with life. And then in reality, inside of you, like you dying slowly, like you're not even, sometimes like you get to the point where you don't even know who you are anymore, because you're so focused on putting all this different facade, and that you're so strong, you're controlling everything, when it's okay sometimes to ask for help, because you're only human. There's only so much that you can do, and there's no shame in asking for help. But it's not being taught like that, right? You have the teachers to be strong, tough, and get yourself together, keep yourself going, like, and things like that. They fine, but at the same time, they should also show you that it's okay sometimes to be vulnerable. You just got to be careful who you're being vulnerable with. But there's no shame in saying, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore and I need help. There's no shame into this.
And I also want to ask you, so what made you decide to come to the States?
Oh, well, I mostly moved here after the earthquake, because I was in Haiti when the earthquake happened, and I was very sick. So I mostly came here to seek medical attention, and I just decided I didn't want to go back, because there was so much happening back home. And at the time, I was at a very vulnerable place, and I didn't feel like I couldn't deal with the situation. And when I called my mom, I told her I don't think I want to go back. She was, okay, fine, I guess you can stay.
How old were you when you came?
I was 24.
Okay, I'm over here thinking you were like 16 or something.
No.
I'm like, you called your mom and said that.
No.
But okay.
That's another point that's like in our culture, like, yeah, always like checking with the parents. You only grown when I don't even know when you're finally grown.
So how's the pandemic affected you?
Like you mentioned earlier, I work in the health field, so that part was very I'll say dramatic, and I don't know, overwhelming, because we lost a lot of people due to COVID, and it was very hard. It was really hard. Unfortunately, so we had to go through this, and of course, with Beyond the Abuse, we had to take everything virtual, because me being also in the health field, I knew what I've seen. I knew what COVID could do, so I didn't want to you know take the chance and gather people, and it's something that I would not be able to live with myself. So we kind of went virtual with everything, all the group support, all the different activities. We we went virtual with them. And it was a good thing, I can say, because by going virtual, we were able to meet people that was all over the world. We had people from Canada, we had people back from Haiti, from DR. So that was like very interesting and very that was a very good experience. So that's why we even consider, even in the case where life could go normal, to kind of still keep certain of our activities online, because it helped reach out so many people, like from all over the world. So this was a good thing. And personally, pandemic was also very hard on my family, because we lost a couple of people as well. So it's something that we still deal with. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you lost a couple of people. I can also relate to that. But well, I mean, I'm just happy that you're able to continue your work, because it really is important. I really just kind of looking at it from like a youth's perspective that really doesn't see, abuse within a relationships a lot. But that's just my like immediate environment. That's just why I'm saying that. So I'm like, we really do need this. We really do need people to focus in on this topic more and acknowledge it.
Because a lot of kids, they find themselves in the situation. It's mostly because they didn't know. Nobody taught them. They didn't know this was bad. Some people don't even think like this is bad, because that's all they knew, like all their life. They grew up seeing their parents like that. And they just think some things are okay when they just not okay.
Yeah, and then that also, rubs off into their own life. They start picking up on certain things that either, the parent who's inflicting that pain onto the victim, or, they pick up certain attributes from, the abuser or the one being abused. There's so many different things. And so I'm like, that also does trickle down into the youth's mind. Like so many different things from the home environment trickles down into the youth's mind. I know when it comes to bullying, it's that home environment. Or it's just the environment that you're mainly in. So it's just like you're feeling comfortable hating on others, or you're feeling comfortable targeting someone for a certain reason. And that just leads to more hate. That just leads to more harm on others. That leads to more, traumatic results or devastating results, or trauma, like paranoia, depression, nights, anxiety, the list goes on and on. And I'm just like, we do need to put an end to that. That's why it's so important to have, beyond the abuse. So what are your hopes and dreams moving forward with your work?
Well, I'm hoping that we're continue to make a difference in our community, and really you know reach as many people as we can, help them becoming that the person that they were meant to be, get out of this situation. um and I'm hoping to really make a difference in people's life. I don't want to be that organization, that kind of like, you just there, you there, and then you do all the different thing, but it's just like you don't really you're not being impactful. So I want to be able to reach more youth, um prevent them from getting into different this kind of situation, mostly show them that they always have options out there for them. And I'm also open to partner with other people that will help us like grow and reach more people, and if possible becoming international, and most like really being impactful and make a difference to as many people as possible in their life, and being there as a support, being there as a reference, and I don't know. It's just so much, and I know like we still small, but I mean, I should not say small, but we kind of still local, and focusing on like my little community that we're building. But I'm really hoping to kind of like being able to reach more people, and kind of like be like a reference point, like when people see the name, they know that they can come to that place, and that help is there, and and their life really gonna be changing once they reach out to us. So that's mostly like like the biggest dream I guess I'll have for Beyond the Abuse.
Of course, I'll be on that journey to help you out in any way that you need. I really love what you're doing, and I'm so happy to have spoken to you today. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Would you like to share your social media platforms that you're on?
Sure. Yeah. You can find me personally on Facebook and Instagram at Joanne M Cherisma. And also you can find Beyond the Abuse on Facebook and Instagram at Beyond the Abuse. And the website is www.beyondtheabuse.org. And our phone number is 516-800-7686. And the email address is info@beyondtheabuse.org. So feel free to reach out if anybody will have any questions, you know, who's seeking help, or even we also open to suggestions. So if we're just there, we're just available and open.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Joanne, for showing how you race to speak up in your community.
Thank you so much for having me once again. It was so great being with you.
Thank you to everyone who's listening. I hope to see you guys at future Race to Speak Up podcast. If you have any questions about the Race to Speak Up podcast, feel free to contact me at racetospeakup@gmail.com. Make sure to go to my website, www.racetospeakup.com, and check out all things Race to Speak Up. Make sure to follow at Race to Speak Up on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for updates on future podcasts. And also join the Humanity Rising movement. Humanity Rising offers scholarships for students making a difference in the world through service. Visit www.humanityrising.org for more information. And remember to ask yourself this question: how do you race to speak up?